Good morning, everyone. I'm Julie Livingston of Want Leverage Communications, a public relations and LinkedIn consultancy, and I'm back for another edition of PR Patter, my semi-weekly show which features conversations with the amazing people from across my public relations and marketing network. If you like what you see, please visit my website at wantleverage.com and download our free tip sheet. Make your C-suite stand out on LinkedIn, because what we specialize in is in raising executive visibility on the LinkedIn platform. I am so delighted today to have my special guest, Brian Wallace. He's the founder and president of Now Sourcing, an industry-leading content marketing agency that makes the world's ideas simple, visual, and influential. I love that, Brian. Brian's been named a Google Small Business Advisor from 2016 to the present, and he's joined the South by Southwest Advisory Board and starting in 2019. He's still doing that, and became a small SMB advisor for Lexmark in 2023. He's the co-founder of the Innovate Summit, which successfully launched in May 2024. So it's great to have you, Brian. I'd like to begin by having you share a little bit about your backstory, how you got into this space.
You betcha, because that's not exactly what everybody went to college for back in the day, because it didn't exist.
Right, that's right.
How do you fall into this crazy thing? How do you innovate things that don't exist? Well, sometimes out of necessity. So, and thank you for the opportunity in being here today, Julie. Pleasure. And love talking about this. So born and raised in New York, born in Brooklyn, but you don't hear the accent, which means that I grew up in the suburbs. And eventually, after nearly a decade in technology, I enjoy the art of conversation and communication a lot more than just tech. Tech is great to know how things work, but ask yourself, would you really want to be in technology working for CrowdStrike after that whole thing? Not to throw shade on them, but it's just a reference that I'm sure everybody's familiar with, especially if you were sitting in an airport for a day. So after a career in technology and understanding that I wanted to communicate more than just do the technology, I eventually made my way out into the Midwest, first in Louisville and then later in Cincinnati, where it was really, and this is just about, depending on when you're listening to this, just about 18 years since its inception. And back then in 2006, while the housing crisis was destroying the world's economy, we found a nice little niche for ourselves in the world of social media, which we quickly parlayed into narrowing it down more into the world of infographics and visual communication, because I find, and I'm sure you'd agree, and I'm sure your listeners would agree, it's nearly impossible to try to be everything to everyone. When everybody wants to say that they're full service, is that really what you want to do for the world? Or is it worth really sharpening and honing your craft to develop something that everyone can appreciate? So,
absolutely.
Back in the day, like you do, I found that myself and our small team was really good at a few very specific things that made the inevitable launch of the world of infographics and visual communication, as we're one of the first in the space, where I noticed that we were very good at not just on the social side of it, but really the ability to do effective storytelling, to do that through visual communication, and then to just kind of have a knack for the pulse of what people found interesting on the internet, whether that is going viral, although I shiver when I hear phrases like that, because not everything should go viral.
No,
and I'm not sure that is our best and highest utility.
And just because something doesn't go viral doesn't mean it wasn't successful.
That's correct. Absolutely. So a lot of the key to the internet is having assets of value and sharing them with the right people and having the right moment of opportunity. So you kind of have to string and thread that needle through all 3 points, or it's not going to happen. It's probably a little bit of luck too, for being honest. So I found that we had the ability to develop a lot of relationships with media and journalists and people that own different websites. So we just somehow bundled together some things that weren't exactly meant to go together, primarily research in the form of storytelling, visuals, and then some elements of both really PR and SEO, which I'm sure we'll touch on some of those things. But
sure. Yeah.
In short, that's kind of where we've been and how we got here now.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Thanks, Brian, for that. I appreciate it.
Of course.
So we, with the advent of the internet, with Instagram, Facebook, all these other TikTok, all these other social platforms, we have become much more visually focused than ever
Mm,
before.
that's right.
And how does that affect the way we kind of take in information and the way we tell stories?
Well, first off, don't spend too much time on your phone and doom scrolling through social all day. It's probably leading to a mental health crisis, but I don't know that probably a different show for that one.
Yeah,
But I said what I said, and yeah, be mindful of your screen time. We're all guilty of it from time to time. That being said, the fundamental way that we engage with content when we are not reading a physical book, but looking at things on our phones and on our screens is different. It's an entirely different process that's actually not called reading. I'm not insulting humanity. I'm saying that it is something different. Jacob Nielsen, about 30 years ago, who's one of the fathers of usability, said this. And the word that he used, which I like to use a lot as well, is something called chunking, where your brain is actually lighting up in different regions, where you're looking for different visual patterns. Now, he took it to mean more on the written word sort of things, where you're looking for a title, a bulleted list, a headline, context clues for what's important, because your brain and your eye tracking is panicking. You're looking all over the page, trying to figure out what to do as you're reading left to right and then scrolling at the same time. And there might be ads popping up and there's notifications going off. So we as humans are primed to figure out these visual patterns. So if you think about when you were learning about the solar system in school, do you remember reading paragraphs of it, or do you remember a handy chart that actually showed the solar system?
that's true.
So
That's
our
right.
brains retain visual information, part and parcel with the elements of visual storytelling, in a much better way to retain information and some context clues for rapid cognition later on. Yeah.
That's cool. So
Yeah.
we know from research, I know from being a publicist and using
Sure.
infographics
Mhm.
to tell a client's story that's newsworthy. We know that simplicity counts.
Right.
That the simpler your message, the more likely it will have retention power, right?
That's right.
So how do you do that? How do you kind of boil the ocean for your clients and make sure that you're just getting the top nuggets of information that you'll
Mhm.
translate into something that's visually exciting and digestible?
Yeah. So 100%. And I think the best way to answer that is, let's imagine, although we're PR and communication folks, let's just put our journalist hat on, which I actually do write for some places. So I have a journalist hat around here somewhere. So imagine we're a journalist, and imagine we're getting we open we get our coffee in the morning, and then we check our email, and we know what's going to happen. We're going to get incessantly pummeled in our inbox to the tune of potentially hundreds, thousands of pitches of people that don't know us, don't know what we care about. And what is the currency of communication all too often between PR and comms with journalists? What's the interface? What's the currency to try to get their attention? A gigantic press release. Are we boiling anything down? It's kind of failing the test of what I just said about chunking. If we know that people aren't going to read online and we're only going to give them 5 paragraphs of stuff that they don't have time to read, that's probably an automatic no, to the
Right.
point where they're probably going to unsubscribe from your list, mark it as spam, might say a few unkind words back to you if they're really in a bad mood. But in general, they might not say anything back to you at all. But here, what you're saying is, through visuals, we have gone through the time and attention, instead of giving you something that might be over the top, heavy-handed, salesy, pushing a particular direction. We're giving you some objective facts that people can wrap their head around from a storytelling perspective, with some data points to back it up. It's still, if you put a clock timer to it, it's still a decently long read. So we're trying to make it more of a two-way street, that we're saying, we're not just putting a press release on you that you have to go digest to and through. We're giving you a visual asset that's really breaking it down. And the power of simplicity isn't to show how smart you are and use complicated jargon, but to get to the point, or explain it like I'm 5, like the kids say today. If you want to portray a message to everyone, to journalists, to the general media, to the general public, it has to be something that is architected in a way almost as if we have a gradual funnel, with a big idea at the top and a call to action at the bottom. So we don't have to start in a linear fashion, and we're doing that visually. I know it's kind of a long answer, but I think that's a
Yeah.
good mindset for how to think through it.
So I think that's a great explanation. I was wondering if you could share with us some of your the infographics you've created, and kind of tell us why they're successful.
Sure. Can I talk about infographics? If I had $1 for every I'm going to do that all day. Sure, happy to. So I have a couple of different tabs up. Let me share my screen. And I think everybody can see it, right?
It says I'm going to click on show on screen. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Oops. All right. Hang on a second. All right. Good to see it now?
Yes.
Wonderful. All right. So let's start with a famous example that a lot of folks are very attracted to. So once upon a time, because we work for so many different industries, we get to collect a lot of really interesting stories and clients and make some really cool stuff happen over the years. This one's fascinating because I think we're more known for business and finance and tech and consumer and cybersecurity and things like that. Sports is a little bit different, but kind of fun. So for those of you who are familiar with the book and the movie and the movement, Moneyball, I can ruin it for you just in case you don't know about it. So once upon a time, all sports agents would look at a baseball player and say, that person looks the part, so let's give them millions of dollars. But then they married the worlds of sports and data analytics and data science, and they came up with a field called sabermetrics. So sabermetrics is a far more sophisticated way to assess a player as a function of the overall team. So you had teams that had low budgets that would automatically lose to teams with big budgets because that's math and that's life. But all of a sudden, teams that didn't have a lot of money were able to somehow overcompete by figuring out the game through data science. So the movie does a great job explaining that. Brad Pitt's a good actor in it, but we'll leave that to your movie watch list for later. The point of the matter is the client, the agent in this case, said, this is a young player that's about to get a bad contract. Can you explain the story to the world so that the basketball industry and the owners who make decisions before the trade deadlines will think of him differently? And we said, that's kind of a big ask, but we'll give it a shot. But then we did it, where we were able, as you can see on the screen, to basically tell a story where we're saying, listen, basketball, I know you're full of yourselves and everybody has like this cult of personality and one-on-ones and all this stuff and trick shots and slam dunks and all that. But the same shift that happened to baseball is also coming for basketball. So case in point, let's look at this player, pound for pound, stat for stat. He appears to be playing at the top of the game with some of the best in the game. And then we're explaining the heart and soul of him, how hard he works, cool. And where's he going to go next. So then it was able to, through a bunch of us whispering in the ear of a bunch of different media and sites, it started getting talked about all over the internet. And it was just blowing up on social and Reddit and all these things. And by the trade deadline, people said, wow, let's give this guy a shot. So instead of him getting a league minimum, he got a $64 million deal. Kept playing well.
That's pretty nice. Yeah.
Follow up. And then I know he actually just signed with the Pistons a couple months ago at the time of this recording. And I think he got something like another $25 million a year or something absurd.
Hard to fathom.
Sitting here, shooting from three or whatever. But I would like to think that we made a big difference within the sports realm. So that was definitely a pretty cool way of really uniting the parts of what I've been talking about and really explaining how to.
I love that because you're giving different snapshots of his career and his accomplishments.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Want to see some more?
Yeah, sure.
All right. I could do this all day long. I really like this one because I find that a lot of people, if you've ever used Pinterest, you might have come across this in the wild. What's neat about this, in addition to that, is it isn't new, right? This is probably more than a decade old at this point. And you might say, why am I even talking about this? This is something for the painting industry. You ever hear the phrase watching paint dry? It's not a compliment. Yeah. It's an exercise of boredom or patience, as I'd like to say. So instead of doing what everybody does in the space, where they just take out a bunch of ads and they say that our work is insured and good reviews and good quality. And, we watch The Karate Kid, so we know how to, do the paint strokes and all this crap. Who cares? Like, everybody can do that. What if you had the ability to visually tell a story to both educate and entertain somebody that brought the target customer at any of the moments in time that they could use your service to go from a beginner capacity of understanding of your industry to intermediate on the fly? That's almost like brainwashing, right? That's too good to be true. And people find this like it's brand new all the time. People want it featured in psychology textbooks because you're not just selling the company, you're elevating the industry. And you're doing that in a very colorful fashion. Because a lot of people, when they're looking at something like this, their brain is actually doing this. You'll see me just zooming. For those of you who aren't watching a video, I'm zooming out the work that we're talking about. So first, your eyeballs give it a once over, and you're like, oh, this is kind of colorful. Let's dive in. Okay, cool. So now we're actually going to read it. So instead of, again, just selling paint and painting services, let's explain color psychology. And let's understand that the Pantone Institute, if it tells us that blue is a productive office color, as you're looking at this, it's helping you make a better decision in that market. And that's pretty meaningful. This definitely leans more into the visuals and the story as opposed to straight up statistics. It's not to say that statistics aren't important, but it's not the only thing. An infographic really is, in my mind, data journalism, where you are incorporating a story, stats, emotion, and all the above in a visual way to have people process that for further attention.
It's really exciting looking, and as you said, and really resonates with me in particular. And I'm wondering, from a PR perspective, Brian, do you find that journalists will pick these up if they are submitted by a publicist, for example?
They will. Asterisk, caveat,
It depends on the publication, right?
It's always going to depend on the publication, the moment in time, the editor, the beat reporter, what they had for breakfast, if they just ran something. There's a million things that can go wrong in the world of PR and communications. But where I believe this succeed, where some other methods do not succeed, is PR needs to be a two-way street with the journalist. So if I say, here's a press release, what does it do for them? It doesn't help them write the story better. It might have some quotables. It might give them some facts, but it is very limited. And you're basically asking somebody to do a favor for you. And what are you really doing for them? You're giving them a story. Yeah, sure you are. Get in line, right? But here you're saying, hey, we have a super premium asset that if it goes on your website, you don't have to go do all that work. You can feature it. And then we've actually seen stories that have long form communications tend to do really well. They're very shareable. You can chop them up. They can have a say in the matter to some degree. So you're giving them assets that are of use to them, that they don't have to do all the work. Because most often, a lot of the world's publications don't have this ability in-house. So it might be something that they've always wanted to do, and now you're allowing them to kind of live vicariously.
I mean, they may have you sign an exclusive with them, I would imagine, but no,
just depends on the publication and the instance.
That's great. I've had mixed experience with it, where sometimes I pitched a story with a great infographic, and I think that was part of the pitch being so resonant, right?
Correct.
With the reporter, but then they ended up doing their own infographic in the publication.
That's fair. And again, so many things can go wrong. To properly execute a good PR strategy, you have to do so many things right. And you could come across a journalist, and the journalist could say, I hate infographics, right? But at the same measure, you could have a person that says, I hate the color yellow, never email me again, right? I mean, it's almost wild, the kinds of things that we have to put up with. I think we need like an after hours podcast to really kind of talk about some of the horrible side of all that.
Yeah, I mean, I think what reporters wanted, they want eyeballs on their publication and their stories. And if this kind of thing tells the story in a minute, then it's worthwhile.
All day long, don't torture them. Give them things that they want to succeed. And then you might develop a relationship out of that. Right?
Exactly.
That's how you build.
Can you show us another? Can you show us another one?
Sure. I've got one more right up here. I could pull up a lot, but
No,
I'm not sure how much time you really want to go.
this one
One
would
more.
be good.
Yeah, this one's cool. So this place eventually got acquired by GoDaddy, and it is a company that does a lot of like third-party seller tools for Amazon stores and things of that nature. But if you recall what I said earlier in the podcast, I said that a good story has a beginning, middle, and end, but it's not linear per se. It's more like a graduated funnel where there's a great big thing of interest at the top, and then it gets into further details, which a lot of stories are like that online. If you don't have a good title, if you don't have a good header image, why would you think somebody's going to stick to it?
Yeah.
Right? If you're on your iPhone, don't you look at the Apple News and there's like a couple really cool call outs and they did a really good job with multivariate testing and found the exact right title that you want to click on, and they matched it up with some kind of cool visual. So you have to do that here too. So again, our eyeball technique of looking to see if this is worth our time and attention. That's what the trapdoor of the subconscious mind is constantly doing for your benefit, although you're not getting chased by a lion or something, generally speaking. So here, instead of boring you with the minor pieces that are only relative to the very target core audience, who doesn't want to know how Amazon makes money? And look at what this visual's doing to your brain, right? So it's like this guy who's just like a king on the throne made out of your money with a head that's an Amazon box that's probably sitting on our porches right now. And you're like, all right, your brain kind of negotiates with you. Hey, stop scrolling. I want to read all this stuff. So then it goes through all the different explanations of how Amazon makes money, how much better it's doing than a lot of the retailers of times past, talking about how it's been successful, why it's successful. Talks about a crazy stat in here talking about how Amazon unredeemed gift cards makes Amazon billions of dollars a year. I'm not sure to laugh or cry or both when I see stats like that.
Right.
As we get further and further down, you notice that it starts making the turn, if you will, where now it starts talking about, well, what's in it for you aside from just being in the Amazon machine, ordering Prime, ordering some subscriptions and videos and stuff on your doorstep.
So there's sort of a momentum that you can build
Correct.
with a longer kind of infographic like this.
Exactly. So you see, it starts to take a conscious turn into the seller market.
No, that's really cool. And I think you're very, I see the creativity in how you develop these graphics to be really eye-catching. So how do you work with your clients? What information do they need to give to you to make this happen?
Great question. So I think, and I'll turn off sharing here. So I think that because we work with so many different walks of life, industries, focuses, company size, all over the planet, we work with a lot of different kinds of constituents. So it really depends on the maturity model of how they are at a company. So it could be a solopreneur, or it could be a company that's been around for a couple hundred years making billions. So some are going to be more sophisticated and have their act together and have a lot of assets. And I tell them, feed us information. We want to interview you. We want to understand your take on the market, because I have a firm belief that there's a company, there's a market. So there's the company, there's the market, and then there's a market that exists outside of the market that if you tried to, rather than get more than the market share in the market, but try to get market outside of the market to bring it in the market, you would win in a really ridiculous oversized amount because you're writing the history books and you're re-explaining the industry that you live in. I know that's a lot of words, but you get what I'm saying. I think that it's important as us being objective outsiders that are not trapped in the four walls of our clientele, that we really take a fresh look across all the lateral strains of thought that we look across, because we've done this for years, more than a decade and a half that we've been solidly doing basically just this. So we have a lot of good domain insider knowledge and sometimes crossover industries in ways that people don't think about. So I feel like a lot of people, they'll tell us stuff and they'll say, oh yeah, this is just what we do all day. And I'm like, you don't even know what a treasure chest that is. You don't see how important this is.
You can help them break down the information and make it sting in a way that and you can also be objective in asking them questions. Well, I see you have this bit of info, but what about the result of that, or what other related factors?
Exactly. So if they have a ton of information, great. If they only have a little bit, that's okay. The main thing is that we just need a good understanding of their market and their take on their place in the market, because there could be an improper alignment. It could be great, right? But I think everybody needs a
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
outsider objective experience,
Oh
because
my
sometimes
God.
you
Don't we all? Don't we all? I mean, that's often like somebody turning the
Mhm.
lights on for you.
Exactly. Allegory of the cave, if you will.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, Brian, this has been a great conversation. I love your work. And
Thank you.
I think that infographics are just such a powerful way for PR people like me and other marketers to tell a story about a particular brand or idea. And hope you'll come back sometime for another conversation on the topic.
Yeah, I'd love to. Anytime.
Okay. Everyone else, thanks so much for joining.